The camera plays a fascinating role in film. It's an object we never see, and yet we're always aware of it. This is because the camera dictates the focus of the shots, the motion of the action, and the relationship between the environment and its characters. Bedtime Is At 10 utilizes unique framing techniques that are often successful at efficient cinematic language, sometimes not. To better explain this, I need to teach a lesson on framing. Bedtime Is At 10 often uses a technique known as negative space. This means taking the thematic focus of the shot out of the center. This puts an emphasis on the lack of something being there. For example, a shot of Heather to the right of the couch and an empty spot on the left implies that someone is meant to be in that spot. This shot highlights the babysitter's lack of responsibility. Another shot is of Heather opening the front door. The focus is on the hallway instead of Heather. This puts emphasis on the hallway being empty even after Heather closes the door. The shot lingers on the empty hallway. This sets up the audience's false expectation that there will still be nothing in the hallway. The lack and presence of negative space also dictates the perspective of the shots. When there is no negative space, we focus on Heather. When Heather is only in a small part of the frame, we assume the perspective of the entity. Note how in these shots we don't see the entity. This distances Heather and the entity apart thematically. An odd choice on Dmitry Salamov's part is to include shots from the perspective of a security camera, a la Paranormal Activity. No explanation is provided for the presence of the security cameras, meaning these shots have no thematic impact, and they clash with the style of the rest of the short, feeling at times jarring. To better understand this, take a look at these specific instances of security shot normal shot transitions. These two framing devices create two very different styles that simply cannot coexist with one another. You can either have everything from the perspective of a normal camera or the perspective of a security camera. Normal cameras can be used for a range of framing techniques, while security cameras often only have one option. However, security cameras create a very specific style that directly implements the camera as an actual character. The distance, video quality, and muted audio of a security camera can often create a very unsettling feeling. This will only work if the shot is always from the perspective of the security camera. As soon as it isn't, the effect dissipates. Bedtime Is At 10 every so often uses POV shots of Heather. The issue is that these shots are never paid off. The shots are used for when she is looking around but never finds anything. The expectation is that the final use of the shot will involve Heather actually finding something. This lack of payoff makes all uses of these shots feel inconsequential. See, when the camera mimics the perspective of a character slowly looking around the room, we automatically anticipate something abnormal. When nothing happens, we are relieved. When the technique occurs again, we assume something abnormal will happen this time. This will happen each time you use this technique, and if you never do a payoff, the audience will be frustrated. The opening and closing shots of a short horror film are crucial to an audience's experience. How a short starts and ends is what's going to leave the greatest impact. The short opens on instructions to Heather, giving us 5 pieces of information. The subject is named Heather, the person this note is written for doesn't know a lot about Heather. Heather can't have Coke after 7, Heather can't watch anything creepy on TV, and bedtime is at 10. As we've touched on in the second lesson, you need to be mindful of what information you give the audience. If it's important, keep it. If it isn't, drop it. Heather drinking Coke or watching something creepy on TV isn't a payoff and is just there to fill the piece of paper. The shot doesn't actually give us any time to read the final dot point, what's actually relevant to the story. The relevance of Heather's bedtime is actually unclear, which is strange considering it's the title of the short. Your first assumption is that if Heather goes to bed later than 10, something bad will happen, except Heather goes to bed at 8, and something bad happens anyway. Wait, it is past 10? But it says 8 there. So we have a continuity error, and it isn't a small one. I can look past most continuity errors because they don't really affect the story of the horror short. With this one, the time for which Heather goes to bed is paramount. It's in the title of the short. If you mess up something like this, the entire ending to your story falls apart. The final shot is very awkward. The bedroom light is off and the babysitter can't see the entity walking around the room or hear him, even though it's been established he's pretty noisy. She turns the light off, turns around, cut to black, and she screams. The shot ends a fraction of a second too early. The babysitter's gasp preceding the scream is cut off instead of showing the full thing. The length of the shot is quite jarring. Usually short shots would indicate a fast-paced scene, except everything leading up to it had a slow pace. Editing is what controls the pace of the scene. And when you have shots like this, you have to keep in mind the pacing. With an opening shot that is useless and a closing shot that is jarring, the short horror film's impact has been hemorrhaged. Let's talk about visual storytelling, and it's actually something that Bedtime Is At 10 does quite well. A good indicator for effective visual storytelling is putting your horror short on mute and seeing if you can still follow the story. It sounds weird, but when it comes to short horror films, sound just isn't that important. Sound is a lazy way to tell information, using the actions of the character to push your story forward instead of their words is going to be more impactful. It's why shorts that rely on music cues and dialogue are often not very good. Granted, Bedtime Is At 10's story is quite simple and easy to tell through visuals, but it really does go a long way with improving the quality. It's why I favor the security camera perspectives more than the normal camera ones. When the audio is muted, you can't hear what's going on. You're forced to see what's going on. The normal camera perspectives also do quite well. There's very few sound cues and only one short scene of dialogue. As you're watching this video, even with the scenes muted, you're still finding it easy to follow. Something the camera perspectives quite often do is stay still. This sets certain locations in the house as consistent viewpoints. The shots also give us views of very large spaces with no sight of the entity. This gives the entity a feeling of omnipresence and implies it is always watching Heather. There's only two exceptions, one being the perspective shots. The camera's motion humanizes Heather while dehumanizing the entity. The other instance is when Heather is walking to her bedroom. The camera's contrasting motion here acts as a geographic transition, separating the bedroom from the rest of the house. This gives the room a cinematic significance, as it should. Let's talk about one final shot, our introduction to the entity. Heather is sitting on the couch with headphones on. There's a figure in the background, shambling around and groaning. The first glaring problem is the thematic focus of the shot does not match the cinematic focus of the shot. Our attention is drawn to the couch when it should be drawn to the figure in the background. It's awkward. The second issue is the fact that information has been handed to the audience that the protagonist is not aware of yet. A golden rule in short horror films is your protagonist must always know as much as the audience, and vice versa. This creates the best connection between the protagonist and the audience, making the latter more invested in the story. Bedtime Is At 10 never truly succeeds at framing, but it doesn't fail at it either. Instead, it offers a range of uniquely cinematic styles that don't always quite work together, especially the clashing security camera shots. You can enjoy your chocolate milkshake and you can enjoy your strawberry milkshake, but you can't enjoy them mixed together. Successful framing requires a very strict and consistent style of filmmaking. Pick a few techniques you want to use that effectively create the effect you're going for and stick with them. You can use Bedtime Is At 10 as a guide of what you should and shouldn't be doing with your short film. Until then, class dismissed.